the products being used. Sorry. And showing you how to perform some of her favorite watercolor painting techniques, all while using and creating this bamboo stem signifying strength using the Winsor Newton Cotman Watercolor Sketcher Box set. She'll also give you a sneak peek of her upcoming next series of classes that's coming up in April, which is called Birds of a Feather. These classes are not yet available for booking, so I encourage you to connect with Mandy on her social media channels so you can be notified when the sign up features class, and continue to check michaels.com for the classes as well once they're uploaded. There's a sketch outline available for this class. Hopefully that you've already downloaded that and applied it to your watercolor paper. If not, we'll put that link in the chat for you. And also upon completion of this class, you'll be sent an email. Please let us know what you think about the class, how we did, and if there's any particular topics that you'd like to see Mandy perform in the future. The class replay will be available in 24 hours on michaels.com and the Michaels YouTube channel. Please feel free to follow along and paint with Mandy, or sit back and relax and enjoy the class. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to Mandy.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Maddie. Hi, everyone. I'm Mandy Peltier, like Tim said, excited to be back. I think I say this before every class I teach. It's kind of become my script. So I'm going to go ahead and share my other camera so we can get going today. All right, so today's project are these bamboo stems or poles. I've heard them referred to as different things, so I may use both words interchangeably today. And I looked up what are some symbols of bamboo, and strength was one of them. So that's why we went with strength for the lettering, but you can choose whatever you want. And I'll tell you what, bamboo poles really are resilient and strong. If you have any in your area, I was telling Tim and Maddie before class, I have a good friend who lives on like 5 acres, and one whole side of her property is just bamboo because they just take over so fast. But it's beautiful. It's like you're transported into another world when you step into that side of her yard. So I'm excited to do this project with you today. It really is a simple project. We'll be able to comfortably do it within the hour we have together. So that's really good news. So I'll quickly go over the supplies. I'm using the Sketchers Pocket Set, which is what I normally use for my classes. I have a smaller artist palette. We're only mixing 4 colors today, which is more good news. There won't be as much color mixing as there will be for my upcoming classes, just as a little sneak preview. And I have a glass of water. I have a pencil and eraser for sketching the outline. I have a 1.0 Fineliner marker for the lettering only. You can use whatever marker you may already have, or you can even paint on the lettering if you want. And we'll be using 2 brush sizes today. We'll be using a 10 round for most everything with the bamboo, but we'll be using a 4 for just one part on the bamboo and also to mix the paint colors. You may notice I have 3 brushes here, and that's just because once again, I'm going to be using an older, more worn down 4 to mix my colors, and I'll save my nicer, newer looking one for actually painting with. So I don't generally throw my brushes away. I'll just repurpose them for other things when they have sort of lost their shape. And then I am once again using the Winsor & Newton 140 pound, 100% cotton professional watercolor paper. Say that 10 times fast, I dare you. And I have it trimmed to be 8 by 10 in size. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started by sketching the outline. So I'm going to just set a few things aside, pull over the actual outline like I normally do. And how I'm going to approach drawing these bamboo poles or stems is I'm just going to draw straight lines to kind of place where the stems are going to be. So I'll maybe start with the shorter one that's kind of towards the right, and I'll just sort of hold up, and you can even count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then draw a line 1, 2, 3, 4, and that can kind of help you get to the right length or size. That's one kind of trick I do when I'm kind of drawing what I see, is you can kind of count. And then I'm going to draw another curved line for this one here. All right, so I just have basic lines, and now I am going to draw what are called the nodes and internodes. So the nodes on each of these bamboo poles are the thinner vertical shaped, horizontal shaped rectangles. So they're these smaller rectangles on each bamboo pole. The internodes are the vertical shaped bigger rectangles. So when I say internode, I'm talking about the bigger one. When I say node, I'm talking about the smaller one, but I'll also try to use other descriptive words. You can keep pace with me. So I'm going to draw each of these nodes and internodes individually, because if you look at the outline, they sort of have shape and movement to them. They're not just perfect rectangles. So to kind of help them be imperfect, I'm going to draw them each individually. So I'm going to start at the top of this little one. I'm going to try and keep my line as just sort of the center of each of these poles. So I'm just going to sort of make a rounded, longer shaped internode, and then a smaller node. And I'm just going to work my way down this line to draw these nodes and internodes, and they don't need to be perfect. They can have some movement to them. And you can always use your eraser if you make them a little too wide or they're not quite the right shape. Keep your eraser handy, but I'm just going to draw each node and internode. They can be various sizes, but the nodes should be approximately all the same length, and the internodes should also be approximately the same size and length. And so it may not be perfect with my outline. It may not fit on the exact same number of nodes and internodes, just fit on as many as you can. So the good news is you do not have to draw perfect rectangles today. They all need to look unique and different, or they should all look unique and different, just to add some movement and interest to this particular piece. So I'm just being real kind of loose and fluid with my lines today. And we're going to do sort of a layered approach with these bamboo poles today. We're going to do one layer and then a second layer and then a third layer. And so it'll be a fun process. We'll just slowly sort of build up the details on each of these. And this one I'm working on now, I want to sort of be tucked behind the center pole. So after I draw this node here, I'm going to not draw over. I'm going to sort of tuck my line behind. So it looks like it's tucked behind the center pole. And then if you want, you could clean up your center initial lines that you drew on. You don't have to. I've mentioned this before, but I haven't mentioned it lately. I usually use like a 4, 5, or 6H pencil because it allows the graphite to be a pretty light color and it makes it difficult to see underneath the watercolor. Today I'm using an HB, which is pretty dark and it smears pretty easily. So I am erasing my graphite lines today. All right.
Mandy, when you get a chance, can you hold that up a little bit so people can see it when you're done doing that?
Sure.
Just to get a little idea. There you go. Thank you.
All right, and then I'm going to draw on the leaves. So how I'm going to approach the leaves is I'm going to draw on all the leaves that look front and center or foremost, and then I'll draw the ones that are kind of tucked behind next. So you can start anywhere. They're just basic leaf shapes. Some have stems. So I'll start over here and I'll just sort of draw on the foremost leaf shapes on this side here. And you know, your leaves don't have to look exactly like they do on the outline. You can sort of add more or you can even add less. But I'm just sort of using my outline as a guide for placement. And like I said, I like to start with the leaves that are whole, the leaves that are uppermost on the outline, and then proceed to draw the ones that are sort of tucked behind the other leaves. And then I'll do the same over here.
Just to add some commentary to this, we picked 3 stalks because that signifies happiness.
You know what? I did not even remember that. So I'm glad you said something. I'm real big on the rule of odds. So having an odd number of things adds, ironically enough, adds balance to a piece than doing like an even number.
Strength is the core of the bamboo, but 3 signifies, as I'm told, as happiness. So
very good. We can all use some happiness right now in our lives, I think. All right. And then, so I'm just chugging along here, drawing leaf shapes. I'm just trying as best I can to copy what's on my outline. But again, you can do your own thing. You don't have to copy it exactly. I have done a few iterations of this, and the leaves are always sort of in different spots. So. All right. And then the last thing is the lettering. So I got a little water stain on my outline. That's why the T and H look a little smudged there. This is my original final outline. So I'm just going to copy what I see and write a cursive strength. And you can use your own cursive if you want, or you can try and copy the example I've provided on the outline. A little touch of the H sort of going off of the paper, I think, is kind of nice. There's strength. And before we get started, I'll hold this up again. Before we get started in actually painting and mixing our colors, I want to go ahead and write on strength with the marker. So I'm going to do that now, because then I won't be trying to do it when there's wet paint on the paper. So I have my black marker, and I'm just going to slowly go over each letter. So watercolor paper, or this particular watercolor paper, is the professional kind. And so it's nice and thick. It's a little bit rough, which is really good for adding paint. It can make it a little bit tricky for markers. So if you go slower, it'll make it less likely for it to skip over some of the tooth on the paper. So just take your time and go slow as you draw on each letter. And there we go. All right, so I have strength written on. I'm going to set this aside. Okay, so we are ready. So because I had mentioned we're going to be working in layers, we're just going to mix two colors to start. And that way, the first layer can kind of dry while we mix the other two colors. I normally mix all the colors at once with you, but today we're not going to do that, just to build in some drying time. So I'm going to pull down my artist palette. I'm going to pull down my Sketchers pocket set, my water. I'm going to get my rougher looking number 4 brush. I'm going to stick that in the water, swish it around, help those bristles absorb the water. And we're going to go ahead and put water into all 4 wells on the palette right now, so we don't have to worry about that later on. So I'm going to use my number 4 brush as if it were a spoon, and I'm going to place 3 scoops of water into 4 wells on my palette. I will not touch the brush to the base of an individual well. I'm sort of going to shake the water into the well like this. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do that to the 3 other wells on the palette for a total of 4 wells with 3 scoops of water. And we're going to mix 3 values of green. We're going to mix a middle value green to start, and then a light green, and then a dark green. And then we're going to mix sort of a sand color, or like a beigey cream color, to use on the nodes. So we'll start with the middle green, and the middle green is equal parts cadmium yellow, which is the darker of the 2 yellows on the top row, and cerulean blue hue, which is the lighter blue on the far right of the top row. So I'm probably going to do 4 passes of each, and then I'll make adjustments from there. So when I say pass, if you haven't taken one of my classes before, I'm going to take my wet brush. I'm just going to run it into one of the half pans for just a couple seconds. And I'm going to stir it into the first well with 3 scoops of water on it, wipe it on each side on the rim of the well. And then I'm going to repeat that 3 more times. And you can speed up the process here. You don't have to move slow with those passes. I move faster than how I demo in real life. And then I'm going to do the same with the cerulean blue hue, do 4 passes of that.
Mandy, someone had a question when you were actually adding the water to the palette. Why do you not touch the side of the palette, the brush?
Good question. So I had answered that in my previous class, and it's a really good question. The reason why, okay, so I did a project with my daughter, and was walking her through all the steps, just like I do with you guys in these classes. And I noticed that she was touching the brush to the bottom of the palette as she was adding her scoops of water. And her mixtures weren't the same as mine. And it's because as she was touching the brush to the bottom of the palette, she was pulling up water with it. Does that make sense? Instead of just dropping the water into the well, if she's touching the palette with the water, she's pulling up water with it. So she just wasn't getting the right paint mixture. And so it was good that I did that with her because it helped me sort of troubleshoot my own teaching and trying to be more clear in my instruction. So that's why I shake it. So that way we can all have the same amount of water in the well, and it will help us all get the same paint to water ratio in the end.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Okay, so this is a very yellow-green shade. If you're not a fan of yellow-green, if you want, this isn't in the written directions, you can add like a half a pass of ultramarine blue, which is the darker blue on the top row, and just add that in. And that just, I would say, like warms it up a little bit, makes it almost more of a light green that's closer to like a turquoise, but you don't have to do that, it's totally optional. Okay, so don't rinse your brush. If you have, it's okay, but if you haven't rinsed your brush yet, great. Just go ahead and take the paint that's still on the brush and just stir it into the next well on the palette. And wipe your brush a couple times on the edge of the palette. And now I want us to stir our brush in the light green one more time and stir that into the second well. So I'm basically just adding some of the middle green to the second well. So I deposited what was still in my brush for mixing the first paint color, and then I just stirred my brush on that paint mixture again and stirred it back into the second well. And then all we need to add to this now is Chinese white. So I'm going to add 4 passes of Chinese white to this watery mixture that we've added to the well. And it's going to make kind of a mint green color, really pretty. I'm a sucker for mint green. It's one of my favorites. All right. So this is our lightest value green. This is our middle green. We'll mix our darker green in just a little bit, and we'll mix the sand khaki yellow in a little bit as well. So for now, we're ready to do the first layer of paint though to our bamboo. And let me do some rearranging here. All right, so the very first thing we're going to do is pretty easy. We're just going to be adding the light green to each bamboo pole or stem. So we haven't used our tin round yet. That's what I'm going to use to apply the color. So I'm going to just swish that in the water for a second to get those bristles evenly wet. I'm going to blot it on my paper towel just to make sure I don't have a soaking wet brush. And now when I apply this green color, this lighter green color, I don't want it to pool or make a puddle on each bamboo pole, which could be simple and easy to do because they're pretty thin and we're not covering much paper. So just try and put just the tip of your brush into the light green and maybe start at the bottom of one of these bamboo poles. And don't add more paint to your brush unless you really need to. And that will kind of help us get a nice thin coat of this light green onto the bamboo pole, so that it can dry before we need to go in with the second coat of paint. So we're not going to add anything to the leaves yet, just to the bamboo poles themselves. And we're going to do that to each one. And I'm just using the tip of my brush into that lighter green to apply this color to our bamboo. All right. This particular project doesn't take long to do, but it is a little redundant. We'll be doing pretty much the same thing to each of these poles. So if any of you have any questions today about anything, feel free to type them in, and when we're doing one of these steps that are a bit redundant, I can answer them.
Mandy, someone asked about how wide are the stems that you're doing right now? They look like they're about half an inch. Or...
Well, let me get a ruler here. I can give you an exact answer. I would say 1/4 inch.
1/4 inch. And for those people out there that asked if they didn't have the large size 10 brush that Mandy's doing, all you'd have to do is just do multiple passes on what she's doing right now. If you have a smaller brush.
All right. And then I'm also going to draw on a small sample of the pole on a scrap sheet of paper here so I can do some demoing. And boy, I got a frog in my throat just now. The funny thing is I usually have water right next to me when I teach these classes, and I didn't today. So we'll see if I can get the frog to go away. Otherwise, I may have to step away for just a quick second to get a glass of water for myself. All right. So I'm just going to paint on the light green to this little sample one here so that I can do some demoing for you over the next couple of steps. All right, so while this dries, this first initial layer of the light green, we're going to mix the last two colors. So we already have the 3 scoops of water into these 2 wells on the palette. So I'm going to use my rougher looking green to mix the last 2 colors. So we're going to mix a darker green now, and we're going to mix the darker green by using the Ultramarine blue, which is the darker of the 2 blues on the top row, and then sap green, which is the lighter of the 2 greens on the bottom row. Really what we're mixing is like a dark turquoise, but it's going to look like a dark green when it's all said and done. So I'm going to mix equal parts of both. I'm going to mix 4 passes of each, and then I can make some adjustments from there if I want to. All right, looks like the frog on my throat went away, so hopefully it stays far away today. All right, so I'm going to start with 4 passes of ultramarine blue, and I'm going to add to that 4 passes of sap green. We got a lot of rain this weekend, like a lot, and today it's in the 80s. I just can't even believe it. It's pretty soggy out there though. All right, and I'm doing 4 passes of sap green. And you can see how this is darker than the other 2 colors we have. And if you wanted to darken it up further, you could add a little bit of brown to it, and that would darken it up a bit. Maybe we'll do that today to darken up some aspects of the leaves, but for now I like it as it is. It just looks like a really pretty darker green color. And then I am going to rinse my brush, blot it on my paper towel, and then to mix the sand color I had mentioned, I'm going to start with 1 pass of yellow ochre, which is the yellow on the bottom row. So I'm going to do 1 pass of that. And then I'm going to add to that 4 passes of white. And I don't even care that there's a little bit of the light green on the white. I'm going to use it anyways. So I'm going to do 4 passes of white. So when we add white to a color, we are tinting the color. It was brought to my attention that I misspoke in January. I was calling tinting tone and toning tint, and I apologize for that. They're both 4-letter words that start with T, and the 3rd letter is N. So it's easy to get them mixed up, and I misspeak all the time. So I apologize for misspeaking. So if you go back and watch those initial classes, when I say tint, I mean tone, and when I say tone, I mean tint. So I'm tinting this color by adding white, and you can see it makes sort of like a camel or sand color. I actually think I want mine to be a little bit more yellow, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow ochre in mine. Maybe just a little bit darker. There we go. And I can rinse my brush and set it aside. And I'm hoping this first layer we've done is dry. I probably should have done my demo layer first since I'm going to demo. All right, so we're going to add our 2nd layer of paint to our bamboo poles. And we're going to do it with the middle value green that we first mixed. So this is going to be, I think it's fun, but you do sort of have to surrender and just loosen up and not worry about maybe being perfect or being precise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be applying a little bit of this middle value green to all of the internodes. And so the internodes are those larger rectangles on each pole. And so I'm not going to be applying it to the node itself. We're going to leave the node itself without any color. So I'm going to start at the top of each internode, and I'm maybe just going to dab on or even do a stroke across the top with this middle green color. And I'm just going to loosely sort of pull down with my brush to create some vertical lines, not trying to fully cover the initial light valued green that we initially applied. And again, I'm not going to apply any color yet to the nodes themselves. So I'll demo for you here. I'll even try to see if I can hold this up so you can see a little bit closer here. So it may not be precise since I'm holding it with my non-dominant hand, but so I'm going to just sort of paint on some of that middle green to the top. And then with my brush, I might pull some down along the left side, maybe the right side, and right through the middle. It almost creates like an M shape. And then you can put a little bit above a node and then a little bit below the node. You see how you can still see some of that light green? We don't want to fully cover what we've already done. So I'm just sort of using the brush to just sort of loosely cover most, but not all, of what we previously applied. And I'm going to be doing this to each internode on the bamboo stem. Does that make sense? So just be real loose. Each one looks different. I'm not going to fuss with it and keep going over and over and over, because then before you know it, you're going to have it fully covered. So we do want to have some of that initial layer still peeking through this new layer we're adding. All right, so hopefully that is helpful, and we can go ahead and start and do this to every single internode. Again, we're going to leave the nodes alone, but you can apply a thin amount of the middle green both above and below, but not to the actual node itself. So I'm going to start by doing this here. Pulling my brush down loosely. And Tim, were there any questions about anything at all? Because this is one of those monotonous steps. So ask away, guys.
No, not yet. Someone was just asking about the color, the water palette that we're using, and we gave them a link to that one that they're using.
It's a great palette. I really like it. You can mix a wide number of colors with it. It might look small, but it be mighty. All right, so I'm pretty much just doing like 3 vertical strokes on each internode, but you know, if you end up doing more than that, that's fine. But I'm just trying to cover most, but not all, of what I previously applied. I'm kind of using just the tip of my brush, maybe just a little bit to the side towards the tip, but I'm just being kind of, I mean, obviously staying within the lines, but I'm not trying to be super precise either. And we'll do something else to the actual nodes, but that will be for the very end. That's where we're going to add that touch of yellow. Even with this second layer, I think they already start to take some shape. There are some styles of watercolor where you can just do a lot by doing wet into wet. And then there are others where wet over dry, which is what we're doing now. We're adding wet paint over dry paint, or maybe it's partially dry. Your initial layer may not be fully dry yet. But you know, wet over dry is usually how you're going to get the detail. And I would say wet over dry is what we normally do in my classes. I mean, I think there's a good mix, but. All right, so I'm gonna hold this up. See how every single one of those inner nodes looks a little bit different from the next. That's exactly what we want. And we're going to add the first layer to our leaves next. And I'll show you this on the scrap sheet of paper as well. So if you're still working, you can keep working while I do just a little bit of demoing here. I always like my classes when I have enough time to do a little bit of demoing. All right, so we've done this before in some of my classes. This first layer for the leaves is going to be more wet into wet. And I'm going to use the middle green and the lighter green, maybe just a touch of the darker green. I'm sort of going to just work in between all 3 of these colors, and I'm rarely going to be rinsing my brush. I'm really only going to rinse it if I want just the lighter color. So I'm going to start with the lighter color. So I'm going to show you what I do. And this is also another one where like, there's no right or wrong way to do this as long as you just follow the process. Each leaf is going to look a little bit different. So I might start by taking a little bit of that light green, and I might apply it to the tip or even just the entire left side of a leaf. And then I'm just going to place the tip of my brush maybe into the middle green, and then apply that along what's left of the leaf. I might start the next leaf, maybe applying the middle green to the tip. And then maybe I'll do the dark green just for like the bottom part of that leaf. So you see, I'm just sort of working in between all three colors. I want to go back to the lighter one, so I'll just quickly run some blot. And then I might do the light green and then just do the middle green to what's left. So each leaf is going to look different. We're just going to be working back and forth using the tip of our brush in between the three greens. Obviously, if you have some dark green on your brush, if you place your brush into the light green without cleaning your brush, it's just going to go on dark. So if you want it to look light, you'll need to rinse and blot your brush really quick. But we're not going to do anything to the stems. And right now, I only want to apply these colors to the leaves that look like they're foremost, the ones that are where you can see the entire leaf. So like this one, these two, maybe these two, this one, this one, this one. So any that are sort of tucked behind other leaves, we'll just leave those without paint right now. We'll do that next. So for right now, let's just tackle the leaves that are foremost using that technique I just demoed for you. So start with just a little bit of maybe light green on your brush, apply it to part of one leaf, the tip of the brush into the middle green, apply that to what's left. And every once in a while, you can put your brush into the darker green if you want. But it's not required. You can even put your brush into the dark green a lot if you want. I mean, this is your project, but I do the darker green a bit more sparingly. And move more in between the lighter and the middle green predominantly. So just a little bit of this, a little bit of that on each leaf. It's okay if there's some negative space, like there's that little chunk right there on that leaf that doesn't have any paint. I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to worry about it. So again, the ones that are sort of tucked in the back, I'm not doing anything with right now. I'm going to leave those alone. Because we're going to repeat the same process to those, but with different paint colors. And it looks like I may have to mix a little bit more paint today, which is fine. I just cleaned and blotted my brush because I want to use that light green again. The only thing with demoing is it does go through my paint a little bit quicker. All right, so any forefront leaves, we're going to add paint to. But not to the stems. And I'm going to go ahead and mix more middle green and light green while you guys paint your leaves. I have run out here. So in case you missed it the first time, middle green is equal parts cadmium, or sorry, cerulean blue hue and cadmium yellow. And if you want to make it a little bit less yellow green, you can add like a half a pass of ultramarine blue to it. And then the lighter green is just some of that middle green with some Chinese white added to it. Makes it more of a mint green, which I really like, as I said earlier.
Extra mixing is helping people out who might have joined us late, which is great. That's up.
Oh, good, good, good. And I always provide written directions for my classes. I want everyone to be successful, and I think we all learn in different ways. So if you showed up late, you'll still be able to perform this project through the written directions or by rewatching the replay. It should be uploaded to the Michael Store YouTube channel tomorrow. I think they usually say 24 to 48, but it's usually 24. Unless it's a Friday class. All right, so I have all my forefront leaves covered with that sort of combo of paint colors. It's real pretty, sort of wet into wet look. And while that dries, we're ready to add our third layer to our bamboo poles or stems. So I'll do some more demoing. So we're going to use the darker green now. We've used the lighter green, we've used the middle green, now we'll use the dark green. So I'm once again just going to be using the tip of my brush, and we're going to be doing the same process as what we did. And I'm once again going to try and not cover everything I applied first and everything I applied second. So I may even try and show a little more restraint this time and try to use the tip of my brush a little bit more. So I know I definitely want some on like each side of each internode and like along the top. But as far as like through the middle, I might show a little bit more restraint. It'll just sort of depend. It's hard for me to do this not on a level surface here, so it's gonna look a little sloppy. I just hope it allows you a little bit easier viewing point. So we're just gonna once again just sort of partially cover each internode with the darker green. I'll hold up the finished one so you can kind of see. That may help. All right. So I'm only going to add more green to my brush if I need it. The water that's in the brush will sort of dilute this green as we go. And I think that adds sort of a nice sort of effect to the internodes. Just sort of makes some of them look a little bit lighter and softer than others as the water sort of dilutes it. And I always do this. I rest my palm on the paper and then I smear paint. So I need to try not to do that. Change my grip on my brush here so I don't. Sometimes when I'm teaching, I get distracted by those things because I'm focused on what I need to tell you all. Don't worry too much if you feel like you're putting too much on. Adjustments can always be made later. I would err on the caution of less is more because you can always add more. It's harder to take away. And if you want, if something goes on really looking harsh, one thing you can do is you can quickly rinse your brush, blot it, and then you can take a wet but not like super damp brush to sort of smooth out the hard edges. That is one thing you can do if you think it goes on a little too harsh looking in spots. Like this one here looks kind of harsh. It's probably late to do that now because it's already started to set and dry, but you can do that if one of your paint marks goes on just a little bit too harsh. You can rinse, blot, and then just sort of run your brush over it to smooth. I would maybe do 2 or 3 internodes and then do the wet and blot thing, because it won't dry that fast. Can also help it go on just a little bit softer looking too. All right, so for this bamboo pole that's sort of tucked behind this main front and center one, where it touches, where the behind pole touches the front pole, I am going to make sure I have some dark green there. So it kind of creates what looks like a shadow or a dark value. Just for some accuracy there, how it would be in real life. Okay, so I'll hold that up so you can see what it looks like with that third layer. And you can even do a 4th layer if you want to add even a little bit more detail. We may do that. We may have time today. We still have 20 minutes and we don't have much further to go here. But what we're going to do now is the leaves we haven't yet added paint color to, we're going to add paint color to now. And we're going to do it in the same way as we did the first leaves we did, but we're going to mostly use the middle green and the dark green. It's not that you can't use any of the light green, but we're mostly going to be using the middle and the dark now. Same process where I'm going to take a little bit of the middle green, since that's the lighter of the 2 colors, and maybe apply it to one side or 1/2 of a leaf, and then the tip of my brush into the darker green and apply that to the rest. These smaller, skinnier leaves, you could just do those one color if you wanted. And I like to make the top part of those leaves like wispy by just using like the tip of my brush and just dragging it on or dotting on the end. I think that adds like a nice little touch. All right, So I'm just sort of working back and forth between the middle of green and dark green, using just the tip of my brush to transition between both colors. And I have to rotate here so I don't rest my palm on wet paint. Quiet class today.
There's some stuff going on in the chat. A lot of praise, a lot of people saying thank you to everyone, and they really appreciate classes that you put on and the great instructions, because they're able to go back and follow afterwards along on the replays, which is very encouraging. Everybody wants to go back and watch this.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. I am not able to follow along with the chats during my classes, so I appreciate the encouragement.
We have one question I could ask you that someone was asking. Let me just get to it. So they were asking, this is from Karen, saying, okay, how do you decide which parts of the plant that you're going to paint first? Like, how do you know which ones that you're going to do the layerings?
Let me see if I understand the question right. Like just where I start, or like how I start, like how I determine the process? Yeah,
I think that's what she's asking. Which parts to layer at once are you doing a rotation? I was saying that you were working from the foreground first and then going into the background, and then also that you tend to always work with the lighter to darker first on the colors.
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's what I was going to say. Generally speaking, like sometimes when I paint birds, I'll start with the eye, which is black. So that's obviously starting with the darkest possible color you could start with. But in general, I work from light value to dark value. In general, there's, just like the English language, rules can be broken. In general.
Hopefully that helps Karen. She was looking to do some other things on her own work. So to guide her.
I hope that helps. That's a really good question. But I think that's a general, the general thing that most watercolor artists do is light to dark, because it's easier to make things darker. It's harder to make things lighter, once the paint is on the paper, if you will. So it just allows more room for correction if you work light to dark versus dark to light. There are some mediums where you can work dark to light, or there's some surfaces with certain mediums that you can work dark to light. But when you're working with white paper, man, there's only so much you can do. All right, so we have the first layer of paint done to all the leaves. I'm going to just let that last layer dry, or this, the last thing we did dry for a second. So what I want to do now is I'm going to add this sand or yellow color to each node. I'm only going to apply it to the very top of each node. So I actually need my nicer for here. So I'm just going to use the tip of my brush again, just put a little bit of that sand on my brush. And I'm just going to paint it along the very, maybe top half of each node. Just like that, because we still want some of that green showing. It's just like a nice little detail. Now, if you think that line looks too harsh, you can do that thing again where you clean and blot your brush and then just sort of run it along that bottom edge of the sand paint to just kind of help it transition into the light green, but that's totally optional. It's only if you don't like harsh lines. So I'm just going to take the sand here. Try not to rest my palm on wet paint. So help me. And I'm just sort of dotting it onto the upper half of each node. I don't think I'm going to do the smooth in transition thing, or maybe I should, so that some of you will have time to do it if you want to. Maybe I'll do it to this pole. I'll do the smooth in transition thing. And we'll also add a little bit of sand to some of the leaves too in a second, because it adds like a little nice pop of color to some of the lighter leaves. All right, so this one I said I'll do the rinsing my brush, blotting it, and smoothing. So I'll maybe do 3 nodes, then rinse, then blot, and take my slightly damp brush just under the line to help kind of soften it and transition it into that lighter green that we applied at first. There we go. Starting to take shape here. Okay, so then the last things I want to do are just do another layer of paint to the leaves, or even just to some of them. And, you know, we could always add a little bit more color to the internodes if we wanted to also, but that's completely optional. We'll start with the leaves because I definitely want to add more color to the leaves. So I'll hold up my finished one here. I don't know if you can see this leaf, how you can see the initial layer right here through the middle. And then there's like other tones along the side, or even, I don't know how well you guys can see this one through the camera, but I did 3 strokes. You can still see a little bit from the initial layer we did. So we are kind of going to do the same thing to the leaves that we did to the internodes, where we want to just add more paint to the leaves, but not totally cover what we initially did. We just sort of want to deepen the saturation or the hue or the paint itself. So I'm going to use the number 10 for that. And I'm pretty much going to stick to the same color combos I used for the foremost leaves and then the ones that are sort of in the back layer. So I'll just start with this one. Well, I'll do my scrap first. So I might start with like the middle green and just apply a stroke along the left side and the right side and call it a day. So I just want to add a little bit more color. You can still see that initial layer kind of peeking through. I might do the same one. Maybe on this one, I'll do like light green and then just do a touch of dark green. So you can do different combinations. On this one, I might even do 3. I might do like a real thin one on the left, a real thin one on the right side, and maybe just one right through the middle. Again, it's really hard. This is an unstable surface, but you can even do 3 lines. We just sort of want to add a little bit more saturation to these leaves. So for the foremost leaves, you will want to use mostly middle green and light green. Not that you can't use any dark green, but for the darker leaves, you'll want to use more of the dark green and middle green. If you wanted to, so some of the leaves here are quite dark. If you want to, you could just mix up a little bit of a darker green. So I just put 2 scoops of water in my palette, and I'm going to do 2 passes of ultramarine blue and 2 passes of sap green. Actually, I'm going to need to do 3 because that still looks quite blue to me. And then I can do a little bit of burnt umber into it just to darken it a little bit. I still need more sap green. All right, and then that will make it even a darker green. So it's the same as what we mixed here initially. I just added a little bit of burnt umber to further darken it, if you wanted to use that on some of the darkest leaves. But that is totally optional. You don't need to. Just even adding another layer of the dark green will darken it up quite a bit more than you may even think or realize. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get going on my actual piece. And so I'm going to use the middle green and the lighter green on the foremost leaves for the most part. And use the darker green mostly for the back leaves. There's really no wrong way to do this. I'm just kind of giving you suggestions here. Just, have a nice variety of colors as you apply the second layer to each leaf. I'm starting with all of my lighter colored leaves first, and then I'll move on to the darker ones. It just makes sense to me to just focus on one thing at a time, or one like color combination at a time. And when we apply color to the darker leaves, we can also apply color over the stems, but I'll apply color to the stems using the darker green mostly. So I'll hold off on that. I'll help you all with that step here in just a second. All right. I'm only going to use that dark green I just mixed up for my darkest leaves. And I'm probably going to just use it towards the base of those leaves just to make it look a little darker where it's closest to the poles. All right, and you don't have to add a second layer to everything. If you like how it looks just with that one layer, leave it. It just helps it look a little more consistent with the poles with the 3 layers we added to those. So I'm working on the darker ones now. I am going to add a little bit of this dark green towards the very base of some of these leaves, because it kind of makes it look a little more set back from the other leaves. But again, you can just use the dark green. I kind of lied to you. I did not practice this. This was like a total whim thing where I'm like, let's mix the darker green. So it's not in the written directions. It's a total just stylistic choice I felt like we needed to do today. All right, looks like I just have these over here. And then mine will pretty much be good to go. Let's see if we want to add any more to the internodes. I think that mine look pretty good. But if you wanted to, you could take a little bit more of that dark green and add just a little bit more along the top of some of your internodes. Just the very top, and that will just sort of darken up some of those. Ugh, I rested my palm once again on wet paint. I'm really good at that. So this is just sort of time for adjustments. I'm just adding a little bit more of that dark green along the very top of some internodes just to add just a little more texture. And I might add just a little bit of dark green to that one pole that's sort of tucked behind this main center one, just right where it's tucked behind and touches the main center one, just a little bit more of that dark green to help it sort of stand out a bit. I dare say the one I did today is slightly more detailed than my example. So I'll hold these up so you can see. Oh, I didn't do the stems though. I do need to do the stems. So stems, I'm going to use the dark green and a little bit of the middle green, but I'm basically just going to paint on thin lines using the very tip of my brush. Oh, and I also said we can add a little bit of yellow to the leaves. I'll show you how we can do that. So I'm just adding color to the stems. It was important to do the stems after the layers on the internodes are dry, so we don't have any like bleeding taking place where the paint will just bleed and not be like a straight crisp line. No. So if you wanted to add a little bit of yellow to the leaves, really all you have to do, it's a lighter color, so you can just apply it to maybe 1/2 of the leaf. And it will dry and blend in with the other greens. So I only add it to maybe like 3 or 4 leaves. It just kind of adds that, what is that? You know, that's nice. Just a nice little touch to some of the leaves. And you could always incorporate the yellow too when you're doing the wet into wet for either that first layer or that second layer. But that is one way how you can incorporate the yellow into the leaves.
Those look great. Love that.
This was a fun project to work on. Yeah. I will admit, I enjoyed this one. All right, so we have 7 minutes, so that's plenty of time. I want to show you 3 of my April classes that are coming up. Like Tim said at the very beginning, the theme is birds of a feather. And the first one I'm going to be teaching is feathers. So it's going to be this wild turkey feather, sort of a hawk feather, in a scarlet ibis. So they're loose and they're fun. It's going to be very beginner friendly. It's sort of the same process as these bamboo poles where each feather is going to get, if I remember right, 3 layers of color to sort of build up the details, yet they still look kind of loose and abstract looking. So that'll be April 5th. And then my second of the 4-part series is this eggs nest. Now, if any of you have been on my website, you've probably seen this eggs nest on my website for a good year now, because I was going to be teaching this last year and it kind of got delayed. I will be teaching it in April. I'm very excited. This is a fun class. You will need masking fluid for it. Masking fluid is critical to the technique we'll be doing to create the various twigs of the bird's nest. So that'll be the second one of the 4-part series. And then it'll be this one, a birdhouse with blue tits on it. I used to live in Europe, and so blue tits are a European bird and they're gorgeous. So I'm excited for this class. Will be fun, and it will kind of teach you wood grain as well, if you've been curious how you can paint wood grain. And then I can't show you the 4th one yet because we're still finalizing that one. I'm still working on the final version for that, but this at least gives you an idea of the birds of a feather theme that we'll be doing in April. So I hope you'll join me for those classes. And I'm going to switch to my other camera. And if you were able to paint along with me today, I would love for you to hold up your work and show me how you did. Let me switch to gallery view here. Robin, those are beautiful apples as your picture image. Those are gorgeous. Okay, let me see. Those look great. Wow, good job. I can tell you all did just an excellent job mixing your colors. They're just so consistent at everything I'm looking at. Those are amazing. Very good, everyone.
Great
You have
job.
no idea. Yeah, you have no idea how happy this makes me. If you're not following me on social media and you want to, my handle pretty much across everything is at Mandy Peltier Artist. And my website is mandypeltier.com. But if you post your finished work on Instagram, please tag me on it so I can cheer you on and like it and see it a little bit bigger than what I can through Zoom. You can also email me through my website. There's a contact tab there with my email address. But it was great spending this hour with you. I really love these classes and I hope you had fun and learned a lot.
Before we end, I'd like to just let everybody know, if you want to save the chat, that transcript that's on there right now, very quickly do it. Go into, you'll see the 3 little dots by the smiley face in the chat box. Hit that there, and that will allow you to save the chat transcript. So you can go back and review that, because it will not be available when you go watch the replay on the YouTube channel.
Good tip.
I'm going to do the same thing myself right now.
Awesome. All right.
And that'll
Have a
save it in
great
your computer.
rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.